screen. And I'm going to start the timer, so I don't go past the 20 minutes. Okay, so let's pick up where we left off with the tutorial last week. So I'm just going to scroll down our page now, our class web page, past the new picture in the slideshow, past into these end of year assignments now, where all the assignments are listed from unit 1, 2, 3, 4, and all the way up to this looping unit tutorial. I'm going to open up the instruction document for where we left off. And I'm going to open up that PDF of all the code so I don't have to type most of that code. So the instruction document and the PDF of all the code. Okay. For the PDF, we've already completed this part, right? This part right here is done. Almost. There is a little piece there that we're missing. If we go to the instruction document, you'll see that we did this first part. We designed this form for prize grab. We added this code for prize grab. A lot of it we didn't have to type. We were able to copy and paste it over from, pretty much all of it was able to copy and paste over. Okay, you might have to clean it up a little bit once it gets pasted in. I tried to explain what's going on because normally we would do a lot more time learning about looping, but because of the restrictions on this school year, we're trying to compact this all down into one tutorial. Just so you guys know, if you decide to take Computer Science 30S, and for a lot of you, I hope you do, because computer science is an awesome subject, right? I will be reviewing everything at the start of Computer Science 30S. That's done normally, but like all teachers in the school this year, we will all be putting a lot more time into review at the beginning of the next course. So don't feel like the fact that we're not doing as much looping work as I normally would is going to put you behind next year. It won't, okay? All right, so we did all this, and we got to this part right here where we added a class to our project, which is just a bunch of code. Excuse me. So if I look at this right here, if I look at, there's prize grab. There's the code for prize grab. But also up here was this section called globals. So now we have 3 tabs open. One is the design of Form 1, one is the code for Form 1, and one is this thing called globals, which is just a place for code. And in there, we made 3 global variables, which added a couple that is kind of a little beyond the 20S course, but I do explain what they mean in the comments. And speaking of beyond the grade 10 level course, or the Computer Science 20S course, I introduced something called an array. And no, you shouldn't know what that is, because that's actually just a look ahead at something we study in the grade 10, or sorry, the grade 11 Computer Science 30S course. Arrays are these awesome versions of variables that can deal with lots of things at once, which is great for games, right? Because, like, think about it. If you were making like a Pac-Man game, you wouldn't want to make variables for every single dot in the Pac-Man game. Or for those of you who did the conditional statements problem 3, where you had to make 12 variables, one for each grade from kindergarten all the way up to grade 12, I guess it's actually 13 variables. That's a lot of variables. So arrays allow you to make one variable that can keep track of all of it at once, but it's a little bit more complicated coding, but it's less coding in the end, okay? That is a topic in the grade 11 computer science course. All right, so we did that. And that's essentially where we left off. So we did all this code, and now we're right here in our instructions on this step right here, right at the bottom of page 5, and that's where we're gonna pick up with today on this tutorial. Okay, so we're going to pick up right at the bottom of page 5. And as you can see here, what we're going to do is we're going to add a form to our project. So we're going to go here and we're going to go project. And just like last week, we added a class to our project. This time we're going to be adding a form to our project. This one is right at the top. Under project, we can add a second form, okay? A second design, so to speak. So I'm going to do that. Add form. And as it says in the instructions, we can just use the name form 2 is fine. So we'll just, come on, Computer's a little sluggish here. So I got spinning circle. While that's happening, I'm just going to do a attendance check. Okay, and Form 2 is fine, so I'm just going to click Add. What you're going to see in Visual Studio now is it's going to go back to the designer. So there is a new form to design on, okay? It's called Form 2. We still have our Form 1. We still have a design for Form 1. If I click on Form 1, there's that design. Now I've got a Form 2, okay? So I'm going to need my toolbox again so that I can add things to that design. I'm going to need my properties window again. Chances are you might have left yours open. I had mine unpinned, so I didn't see them. So now I've pinned them back down. So properties and toolbox. And at this point now that we're using multiple forms, there's another little window that might be useful to you. It's not necessary, but the little window called Solution Explorer is now a useful thing if you have multiple forms. Because now what you can see is, now I can see that I have two forms and this thing called globals. All of these are part of this big project. Normally you don't need that with one form because it can just easily keep track of it. But if I accidentally started closing tabs, like started closing them, like Form 1 and globals and Form 2, now I'm in trouble. Now I have no code, no design. And I would need this thing called the Solution Explorer to be able to bring them back. I would have to double click them over here to say, get back to Form 1. And to see the code, I would have to maybe go View Code. To get to globals, I'd have to double click it. To get to Form 2, I'd have to double click it. To get to the code of Form 2, I would have to go View Code. Or if I had a button on there, I could click the button. But now I've got everything open I need. I've got my Form 2 and its design, my Form 1 and its design, and globals. Everything I need is available now for me. Okay, so that's just what we did to add that second form to this tutorial project. Now we're going to build a design on it, but you'll see here it says you are going to be using things that you have not yet used in this course. So that's part of this tutorial, is looking ahead at what's to come. So now I go to page 6. In page 6, it shows you that you'll be adding two things. One of them is a label. We've done that before. But the other one is something called a timer. Okay? So we're going to be adding a label and we're going to be adding a timer. And then we're going to change some properties. Looks like we're going to be adding two labels, label and label. Okay? So let's start with that. Now, which little area over here in your toolbox you use is entirely up to you. Okay? They're all kind of available to you. Very often it's just set to common controls. So I'd open up common controls, I'll go to label, and I'll add that label on there. And I need two labels, so I'm going to get two of them. But when I go to look for timer, it's not in here. There's no timer in here. So I know you guys have learned you can search this thing, which is great. You can do it that way. But you could also use all Windows forms, and that's just a giant list of everything. And in there you will find the timer. You'll notice the little icon for it looks like a stopwatch. And that's because that's what it does. It works with time. Okay? Now, what you're going to do is you're going to actually add 4 of these timers. Let me add the first one, timer. I drag it and drop it over here. But it doesn't show up anywhere on my design. Timers show up down here at the bottom because timers are essentially invisible. You don't see them. Okay? They run, but you don't actually see them on your design. So anyways, I need 4 of those. So I'm going to go 2, 3, 4. 4 timers down here. Each running separate time. And 2 labels. Okay, that's all I needed to do from my toolbox. So I'm going to unpin my toolbox now. However, now I'm going to need this properties window over here to set several properties of these. Okay? For example, I'm going to have to name these things, all the different names. Okay? So let's do that. I'm going to name this first thing LBL Hero is one of my labels. So up to name, LBL Hero. Whoops, let's try that again. Okay, it's the label LBL, and it's named Hero from the hero of my game. And if you want, you can put in there the text Hero, so you know which label that is. That's going to be the hero of our game. Select my second label. That one I'm going to call LBL Enemy. And it's the enemy in my game. So LBL Enemy. And down to text, enemy. There's my enemy. I got a hero and I got an enemy. What else do I need to do? I need to name all these timers. I'm going to start my timers with the 3 letters TMR for timer. Countdown, hero, enemy, and change. Doesn't really matter what order they go in. So TMR, countdown. TMR, change. TMR, hero. And TMR, enemy. Okay. You can also space these out if they overlap a little bit. That doesn't really matter because you don't see them anyways. But that's what our timers are going to be named. Okay. In addition, there's one other change I'm going to make. It's hard to see here, but I'm going to put the words time remaining 120 at the top of my form. So my form, text of my form, time remaining 120 seconds is what it's going to be. And you can stretch out your form if you want, and you can do things like set the starting position in the center of the screen and all the little details like that if you want to. That's not really that necessary for this. I'm going to set the form border style to a fixed tool window. I'm going to put the enemy here and the hero here, whatever. That's really not that necessary because we're actually going to do a few changes using our code, not just using the designer. But that's a good start for the way all that code's going to go. Okay? It does not have to look exactly like mine. What's important is the names because that's going to be affected by the code. Everything else is not that big a deal. Okay, about 7 minutes left on our timer. So we're going to get started on some of the coding for this thing now. Okay? You'll notice there's no buttons on this thing at all. None, not one button. Okay, so how are we going to code this thing if there's no buttons to code? So now you can see in the instructions is it says code for the form, or we can go into the PDF. We'll get to that. But I think there's one thing we should do before we get to coding this form. There was a couple lines of code that we didn't do back in our first form because we didn't have a second form yet, but now we do. So we're going to add this code, these 3 lines of code, back to our first form where we left off. So we'll leave form 2 for a second. We're going to go back to form 1. And we're going to go back to the button that says start the game. I no longer need this properties window or my solution explorer. So I'm going to close them just so it's easier for you guys to see the code. I'm going to scroll down in that start button. Okay. So you might remember there was all this code in else. All of this code was not necessary if you wanted a 70% on this tutorial. Only this one line of code would be necessary if you're happy with 70% on this tutorial. And again, this might be one of those decisions, again, that some of you that are really stuck for time might want to make. It's like, you know what? I don't have time to do this whole tutorial. I'm going to end it right here, hand it in. If I find time later, maybe I'll go in and do some more of this. Okay. So we did add this code for those who went further. And you can see that right here. That's the exact same code that's right here, but not this code. So I'm going to go into the PDF. Let me just make this a little bigger. And I'm going to select all that code. So this code right here, not that curly bracket. Now, just another tip, because it's been a week or it's been a couple days since you've done this. If you're selecting code off the PDF and not typing it yourself, and you're having trouble clicking and dragging, double click a word first and then try to click and drag. It's just a little quirk with PDFs. Now I'm going to copy it. I'm going to go here. And it's important you know where you're about to paste this code. It is after this bracket, but before this bracket. So it's going to go right in here. Okay. So if you see the spot right here, that's where that code's going to go. It's right there. Okay. Part of this tutorial is figuring out how to position and place the code properly. So now what it's going to do with this code we just pasted in here, what this code actually does is it creates a new form 2, hides form 1, and then shows form 2. Believe it or not, the code actually uses the word show and hide, sort of like hide and seek. So it shows one form and hides another one. Let's see if this works. I'm going to run this. A sip of water while I wait. Okay, so here we are. Remember, if I just try and start the game, it says I have to generate something first. I don't want to generate 100 prizes. Let's say 22 prizes. There we go. Now I click start the game. And now you see it has jumped over to our second form now, which is good. We wanted it to do that. Okay. So that's what those 3 lines of code have done, is they've moved from one form over to the other form. Okay. So this takes care of all the code we needed on page, whatever page number this is, 3 of the tutorial, and 4, we'd already done globals. So if you're following along in the PDF of all the code, we are now on page 6 of that code. You're following along in just the instructions, it's also on page 6. So we're now halfway done this tutorial, more than half, but we're at least at the halfway in terms of page count. All right, so the first thing we're going to put our code into is there's going to be some global variables, quite a few global variables actually. You can see all the global variables are right here on this page. So right on page 6, all the global variables that you need are on page 6. I can literally copy all of this. Starting on page 6, I can copy all this code, and I'm going to paste it over into my form 2. But again, when you're dealing with global variables, you need to know where you're pasting them. So let's get this right. Copy over here, form 2. Okay. No longer on form 1. We're now on form 2. If you can't see your code, go to View Code. Make sure you're on form 2 first. View Code. Now, global variables always go under the words public partial class, but after that curly bracket. So those global variables are going to go right here. They're not before or inside of this thing that says public form 2. This is the spot where the global variables go. Okay, so that's important. Knowing where the global variables go is an important part of the process. Excuse me. Throat is dry today. All right, so what did we just put in there? Well, this is going to have things moving around. So the reality is, if you take computer science and you like video games and you want to make things move around, You're going to have to remember some of your geometry from mathematics. It's just a fact. That's just what, especially games where things move, that's what's going to happen. So in the background, you're hearing my alarm go off. So I'm going to wrap this up for today. And this is where we'll pick up tomorrow, where I will explain a little bit why these global variables are here. And then we'll continue along our tutorial here. We'll now be on page 7 of this tutorial. Yeah, there's going to be a lot of code to copy and paste, but we'll get it done. Okay. All right, I'm going to stop the video now.